pianists, teachers, colleagues, and friends. Today we're talking about how to teach the Schubert Impromptu in E flat major. This is Opus 90 number 2 or D899 number 2. It of course sounds like this. If we haven't met before, my name is Jana Williamson and welcome to my home piano studio in the suburbs of Chicago. It's an early spring day here in Chicago and this opening section of this piece sounds sparkly and reminiscent of new life and exciting things that bring to mind spring for me. Of course, we know that there is also a B section to this piece which sounds much more like a spring thunderstorm. So since this is a long piece and an early advanced work, I am going to split this into two videos. Make sure you are subscribed to my channel so you get the notification about next week's video where I will go over that B section. And I'm going to talk a lot more about harmonic content and theory related things in that video. Today we're going to focus on the A section and scales. So before we go into talking exactly about how to work on this with our students, I want to briefly discuss difficulty level. This is truly an early advanced work, and you do hear professionals program the Schubert Impromptus, of course, on, professional programs. I think of the impromptus, you could argue that this one is the easiest. The A flat from the other opus, number 2, is also on the easiest level for me. Interestingly, for some reason, this particular piece I oftentimes hear played by younger students or less experienced students. Students who could not handle maybe similar level works by other composers. And I've been trying to think about why that is. I think it's because it's very repetitive, it's very patterned, and it does require less of a large hand span than some other Schubert or similar pieces by other composers. You do have a few 4-note chords in here and definitely octaves. Your student definitely would need to be able to handle octaves. But for some reason, this particular piece works better in a smaller hand than some similar pieces. And I have had students in the past, I can think of one in particular, who could reach an octave but could not reach a lot of 4-note chords comfortably, and she could navigate this piece. So like I said, you do hear smaller children sometimes playing this, or students who are at a slightly lower level can handle this early advanced work. All right, we're in E flat major, and the main feature of this A section, of course, is these scintillating triplet scales. Your student would, of course, need to be quite comfortable with E flat major scales before they embark on this piece. It also uses quite a few E flat minor scales. And the reason for that is that Schubert loves to travel between a major key and its parallel minor. So the major and minor that share the same tonic note, in this case E flat, that is an absolute Schubert trademark. And it's something that if you really look at the harmonic content of this piece, it's amazing how he weaves those two keys together and what else he throws in there. So E flat major scales, E flat minor scales, and then there are also several chromatic patterns. This occurs right away at 3 and 4, and then you get the much longer chromatic type of pattern starting at 62. Of course, there are several whole steps thrown in that particular longer pattern as well, but all that to say, they need to understand how you would generally finger a chromatic scale so that they can apply those patterns within this piece. Fingering is absolutely essential, and if you've been teaching a while, you know that students frequently resist paying attention to their fingering. But there's just no option not to in a piece like this. It's going to go by so quickly and has so many scale type patterns. So to that end, I really do recommend the edition that I'm looking at today, which is the Henley text. I really like this edition for many reasons, but one of the big ones is the fingering. Not only do I like a lot of the fingering choices, but there are multiple places where they give you 2 options and you can decide which one works better in your hand. Now, of course, that doesn't mean you have to use their fingering. You can still come up with what works best for you. But having 1 or 2 options that are good quality options is a great starting point, and I do recommend this book. If you click the link in the description, it'll go straight to Amazon where you can purchase it there. So do check that out if you don't already own the Henley text of this. There are a few places that are particularly nasty for fingering. The measure 3 and 4 chromatic spot that I mentioned is just a little bit uncomfortable, so that's one you want to tackle right away. I also find that measure 7, when it's got this little turnaround, so in measure 6, you can just use the standard E flat major scale fingering, but then in measure 7, I really like this 3 on E flat right here in my addition, so that it sets you back up. So 2, 5, and then get back into the E flat scale fingering from there. So all that to say, you're using common sense of what are my scale patterns that I already know, taking a look at what the edition recommends, and then making sure you're following that consistently. The scales in this piece should, for the most part, sound light and sparkly and even dance-like. Schubert was primarily a composer of song and dance, or at least that's what he was known for during his time. The published works that sold a lot were the solo piano dances and piano duets that you could play domestically, as well as, of course, his lieder, his art songs. And so everything in Schubert should have this either very song-like quality or should move like a dance. I mean, songs have to move too because singers have to breathe. Everything is on the breath. So it can't go super slow, and it has to have this forward motion and just light dance-like quality. So how do we get our students' scales to sound good? I'm so glad you asked. I have a brand new resource today called 7 Ways to Make Your Scales Sound Great. And this is a list of 7 general practice techniques with some subcategories underneath each of those 7 ones that are all the practice techniques I take a student through when they're playing something with a lot of fast passage work, whether it's triplet scales like this or 16th note passages, things you find in Mozart. Certainly you have a lot of those, winding 16th note passages that are scale-like patterns. So let's highlight a few of those. The first thing is that you have to pick good fingering, right? We already talked about that, and be consistent with your fingering. And that is a thing you have to work on with students, to be consistent with their fingering. Secondly, we want to make sure that our forearm is always aligned behind the finger. This comes up very quickly in this piece. When we're starting here, this is a lovely place in measure 1. This is a really nice, easy place to align your arm behind your hand. Of course, as you move down towards, we get all the way down to the B flat right next to middle C, then your forearm needs to come in front of your torso in order to allow your fingers to move like that. We want to avoid twisting like this or, any other uncomfortable ways that you could possibly twist your wrist around. And then once you get to measure 17, he even takes it up the octave so that the original motive is even farther up. Now, in order for me, a relatively short person, to get my forearm aligned behind that B flat up there, I actually have to move my torso over a little bit to the right. So just as general practice with our students, whether they are small children starting their journey on piano or early advanced students who are, full-grown teenagers and adults, it's very important that we set them up with good sitting posture, thinking of it like a tripod. You've got 3 legs, your own 2 legs, plus if you picture that your spine continued down through the bench into the floor, that would be the 3rd leg of your tripod. And so you can rotate your body this way, or you can lean onto your right leg, or you can certainly go over this way onto your left leg. When I'm teaching students to do this with long scales and arpeggios, we talk about our head leading, that it's almost like something is pulling your head up and over. You're not crunching like this or doing anything weird. You're just taller and over to the right, and then that allows my arm to align. Secondarily, there are all kinds of practices that we can do, such as varied articulation. I can play this with all staccato. Similarly, I can play it with all marcato, accents, and you would not want to actually perform this all accented. That would be absolutely the wrong style, but it is a good way to vary your practice. So that's varied articulation. Of course, you can do varied rhythms like a swing long short, or reverse that, short long, that's hard to do with triplets, so your students might struggle with that the first time they try it. You can also do varied accents. So again, these are in triplets, so we're going to accent different sets of the 3 notes in the triplet. So I'll start with accenting the first note of each triplet group. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. I'll do the second. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, and then the third. 1, 2, 3. There are other ways you can practice. So again, I would strongly encourage you to click that link in the description so you can get that free download with more ideas on how to practice scale or just general fast passage work within repertoire. But that will get you started on this one. Okay, if we look at the rest of this section, after 24 measures of those scales, we do have some things that start off with broken chords. So looking at measure 25, we have modulated to E flat minor, like I said, that parallel minor. And then we get these broken 4-note chords. Now, as I was talking about the alignment of your forearm before, it's very important that students don't try to hold those, particularly students with smaller hands. If you try to hold that, it's very hard to go on. So rolling off and then only holding the half note on beat 2. Speaking of holding, I do think it is important for the left hand to observe the rhythms of you've kind of got like a dual line part here. If you look all the way over at measure 36, we have the G flat dotted half note for the bass and then the D flat on beat 2. The G flat should continue. It should not roll off. I'm sure Schubert very intentionally wrote the difference between quarter half and dotted half in these various measures. Similarly, when you get to measure 37, it needs to hold the A flat and then lift everything together. So let's briefly finish with a discussion about pedal. If you listen to 10 different professional recordings of this piece, you will get 10 different opinions on how the damper pedal should be used. And Schubert is a transitional figure in music history, coming out of the classical era, moving into the Romantic era, playing on a piano made in the 1820s, which would feel very different than a piano made in the 21st century. So we have to use a lot of judgment and really use our ears when deciding how to do the pedal in this piece. I will confess, when I sat down to practice this for this video, I was using way too much pedal. And I even did a little test recording and listened back and thought, why am I slapping down my right foot for so much of this? I'm guessing when I played this as a teenager, I probably used more pedal than I would ask my students now to use. It's very tempting to just kind of put it down and let it kind of sit there. Start to sound like Debussy if you do that. So I would advocate for not using that much pedal there on the scales. That, like I said, they should sound sparkly and clear, so you want to use less. That said, every pedal decision should be based on where you're going to perform. So if you're going to be in a living room, that's going to have a completely different acoustic and amount of reverb than if you are playing in a large concert hall with a lot of natural reverb. And so it might be appropriate right here in my living room to use more damper pedal than if I were going to perform this in a very live, reverberant hall. Paying attention to what the left-hand rhythm is will also help your decisions around how you're going to pedal with those first bass notes. And when we get to that B section in next week's video, we're going to have a little discussion about those first bass notes being staccato so that we can talk about pedal there as well. All right, I hope that's given you a few ideas on the first section of this Schubert Impromptu, how to teach it. Don't forget to check out the link to the practice techniques for scale passages in the description of this video, and subscribe so that you hear about next week's video. And I'll see you then. Best wishes in your teaching and playing.